Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to talk about another Hoyoverse game because it's no lie at all to say they've kind of been going downhill. If you've been keeping up with HSR, which likely not a lot of you are, and you've been keeping up with the channel, I have recorded a video in the past week regarding Honkai Star Rail and the newest endgame that it's added, Anomaly Arbitration. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not playing this game ever again after experiencing this, because it is without a doubt, the title is correct, it's the worst endgame in Hoyo history. Playing this made me not want to... It made me want to quit HSR, but also quit almost every other game that I was playing, because I've never had my time wasted to such a high degree before. They should have just told me up front, by the way, if you don't pull the on-banner character, you won't be able to play this game mode. Because that was the reality of the situation. And oh my goodness, I'm still a little bit pissed. And so, we got a video by Fleur over here about how Honkai Star Rail is getting more demanding. I've experienced it firsthand, how demanding it's gotten. Let's hear from an expert on the series.
Alright, so let me ask you a question. Do you think we get enough pulls in HSR? I mean, obviously, it's always nice to have more so you can roll for your next anime girlfriend or whatever, but I wanted to actually explore the current state of the game a little bit and...
The answer is no.
...and see what we actually need those pulls for and try to see if we really do need more or not. What really got this on my mind was thinking back to how HSR felt when it first came out. I remember it being a game that was actually praised for the amount of pulls we got, at least compared to Genshin anyway, since that's what came before it. Back then, honestly, it felt like you were able to get pretty much everyone you wanted within reason, and at least in my experience, it also felt like I had enough extra to get a light cone every now and then.
Agreed. I was a monthly pass, battle pass player in HSR, and I really actually never felt like I was in a, awful pulling situation until later on in the game, right? When it felt like, oh, by the way, if you want to play Adventurine, you got to make sure you got Topaz and Fei Zhao too. And then I was like, oh, wait, I really don't like how these Super Break teams are like this. I like the days when I could just use Bronya and a debuffer of some type. I could just use like a Bronya and Ting Yun and then just go make a main DPS, go do main DPS things. But then nowadays, oh, right, you need your Topaz as well. Oh, you need the Robin too. You need the whole follow-up core, just like how you need the whole Ting Yun, the Firefly. Also need the Ron Mei as well as the Gallagher. I don't know, brother. It started feeling like, once again, you needed the whole teams. You needed the support as well, not just the DPS. And guess what? HSR really started losing all of its generalistic supports too.
Now though, I feel that's largely changed.
Oh, sorry, Ling Sha for Super Break, not Gallagher. They needed a Super Break specific healer. Just like how they had the follow-up attack specific healer / sustainer Adventurine. And that's what I call one of the dangers of the 4-person lineup. Because with the 4-person lineup, that gives you even more opportunities to have even more power creep and more specifically tailored teams. Because that's how it was in HSR. You need all 4 characters to clear the endgame.
Really, at least in my opinion, it doesn't feel like we get the same mileage out of our pulls that we did in the past. Honestly, it feels like characters seem to last for lesser amounts of time and also have a lot higher requirements to actually play them. So today, I'd like to give my thoughts on how I feel it's changed and also why I feel those changes aren't really that great for the players.
Let's hear it.
I think the first thing we can discuss is something that pretty much every gacha seems to be using nowadays, and what I'm referring to here is something I mentioned a couple videos ago when talking about the state of HSR's meta, which is their balancing formula. To keep it brief for those of you unfamiliar, most gachas nowadays operate under a system where there is a base power floor for all the characters in the game, but it rises over time. Or in other words, it's basically the idea that as the game progresses and we get stronger, the game's difficulty will rise to match that. But every unit in the game...
A healthy amount of this is perfectly fine. If a game doesn't have a healthy amount of this, then it is going to feel stale over time, right? It's just about making sure that the teams that are maybe on the older end of the spectrum are still able to keep up as time goes on. And that might be the result of new additions and stuff like that. But it's fair to say that Honkai Star Rail took this and ramped it up to 11. And it became unhealthy, the amount of damage progression that was occurring.
Has a theoretical height of power that they can reach, and certain units will naturally have higher heights than others, usually related to how recently they were released. It's also particularly noticeable in terms of rarity, where 4-star units will generally fall off at some point.
She used to be better than Silverwolf. Now she's not better anymore, right?
Or at the very least, they'll be replaced by 5-star units that can do what those 4-star units did, but, better. What this all does is increase the effective cost of each of the teams that we play. Like, getting a 4-star to E6 is something that will naturally happen over time, and therefore it's not really a big deal to fit them into different team compositions.
I think that's one thing that HSR has fortunately done kind of okay. They haven't diluted the pool with too many dog shit 4-star characters, and the end result is that, well, you can get the good 4-star characters up to a pretty comfortable Eidolon level. Unfortunately, Honkai Star Rail has like one good 4-star character. I think it's Gallagher. I think that's the only one, right? Everybody else sucks dick. So, they got one part of the formula correct. Genshin's on the other end of the spectrum, where they got really good 4-star characters, but they're dog shit until they're S6, or C6, or E6, right? But it's impossible to get those characters to E6, or S6, or C6, because there's so many other random fucking 4-stars in the game. So, this is like the other end of the spectrum. Dog shit 4-stars, but at least you can get all of them to E6 with no problem.
But when they don't really cut it anymore, you have to replace them with a better unit, and that means more rolls that you have to spend.
And don't worry, with HSR releasing 2 new units every patch, every single 4-star character has gotten a direct upgrade. Every single one has a direct, analogous, like straight, here is just the better version. Every single one. And they are outperformed in every single team by the 5-star. There is no circumstance where the 4-star unit, I think there's one. It was using Gallagher instead of Linksha with Casterus before Hyacinth released, but then Hyacinth power crept Gallagher in that composition too. So it doesn't matter.
So basically, instead of the game working in a way where you can kind of go for whoever you want and get a light cone for your favorite on top of that, for example, it now runs in a manner where at some point you will have to spend your pulls to get a new character just to complete content that you were able to complete with other units in the past.
And that's the big one. Don't worry, guys. The teams that you were using Gallagher and Casterus on, they don't clear anymore. You'll need Hyacinth to make that team clear once again.
In other, more simple terms, in my opinion, rolling for units and then getting their light cones used to feel like a luxury rather than a necessity, whereas...
Isn't, like, Aglaya actually not usable without her light cone? Wait, sorry, isn't every Remembrance character, like, not usable without their light cone? Didn't they add Remembrance specifically so that you couldn't use your old light cones on the Remembrance characters? That, to me, is still one of the gravest sins I've ever seen this company do. Add the Remembrance path. The Remembrance path is literally, they all do different things. You got a single target Remembrance character. You got an AoE destruction Remembrance character. You got the support Remembrance character. You got the buffing Remembrance character. It's just, it's just there so that you can't use your older light cones on them. That's the only reason of the new path.
Now, it kind of feels like the opposite. Like, I still remember at the beginning of the game when the super cool showcases people were doing were done with teams that didn't have a full lineup of 5-stars with their light cones and an S10 DDD or whatever. I remember when the 4-stars that were meta slowly started to fall out of it as better and better characters were released.
Man, I remember back in the day when I was running my Acheron with, like, Pella. She was popping off. Man, that team was crazy. That team was so fun. When I was running Acheron with Pella and fucking up content. Yeah, I can't do that no more.
I remember when I rolled my first signature light cone for Fujuan just because I liked her and not because she actually needed it. At least in my opinion, it's not really...
Fujuan dies, by the way, if you don't have her light cone. Yeah, she literally can't do her job without her light cone currently. She'll just die. The damage done by enemies has been power crept so much. She will take too much damage, and you won't be able to clear.
Like that anymore because it feels like we're now expecting...
She dies with it, so you need E2 and her light cone for her to survive now.
Expected to have certain things to participate in different endgame content. I mean, think of how many characters want not even Hyacinth, but just her light cone to function at max potential.
She does more damage than DPS characters, by the way. She also heals. Yeah, this character's... What were they doing?
Stuff like that just wasn't a thing in the past, and personally, I don't know if I like the fact that the game has been moving in this way because, as I always say, it takes away the choices a player has when deciding what to roll for, and honestly, that's kinda just frustrating.
Someone's done calculations. Tribby and Hyacinth are like a duo that's meant to be used with HP scalers and remembrance characters, right? They are the best support duo, I think, for every character in the game. You can replace every other support combination of like 2 characters with Hyacinth Tribby, and every single team does better. I think they're called the wheelchair comp because they do so much damage and have so much buffing that they make every other character in the game stronger. I think except Finon and Super Break, because those require full 4 teams. But yeah, your Fei Zhao and stuff, don't worry, your Topaz is now actually useless.
Now, that said, to be fair to HSR here, this isn't a problem unique to this game specifically. Pretty much every mainstream gacha nowadays slowly filters out their lower rarity units and eventually replaces even higher rarity units with new characters. For example, in Genshin, out of the 47 4-star characters in that game, I'd say only around 25% of them are actually frequently used.
Let me see over here. I think brother's being too generous with Kale. Get her the fuck out of here. No one's using that shit. Let me see what else. Kaya, nah, brother. Kirara, nah, brother. Layla, okay. I think he's being a little bit generous over here. There should be a lot more reds than yellows on this thing, if I'm frankly being honest.
Wuwa has an even lower percentage, and
I mean, does this really count? You can't even fill up 2 roles, or like 2 rows. That's 11 characters. I also wouldn't put Yang Yang as... I would put Yang Yang as yellow. I would put Danjin as green. And that would also put Taochi as yellow, too. That would be my take on this. Taochi's a yellow, Yang Yang's a yellow, and Danjin is a green.
And ZZZ is slowly starting to filter out their 4 stars, too.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of the same situation over here, right? Also, I don't think anyone is using Sokaku anymore. No, I don't think Sokaku and Seth are even characters right now, right? I think the main thing is, I think it's just Nicole. Actually, I think it's like Nicole as a green, and then maybe everyone else... Nicole and the panda is green, and then maybe everyone else is yellow. Sokaku is still a thing in Mono Ice. You guys do know that Mono Ice, like, they nerfed it, and it doesn't work properly anymore. After they did nerfs to it. So, that's the thing. That's why I'm saying Sokaku isn't used anymore. Because they nerfed Mono Ice. And she was only used in Mono Ice with Miyabi, but that team got nerfed.
Despite it being normal, I do still think it's something we need to keep in mind as we look at how the overall cost of teams have risen over time. Something that is more unique to HSR though is the lack of 4-star characters in general. I mean, being honest, HSR's 4-star characters aren't actually all that bad in the grand scheme of things, or at least they weren't before they got shuffled out for better options. Hunt March, Gallagher, Tingyun, Pella, Mose, all of those guys used to be decent options, but due to Hoyo seemingly deciding to no longer release characters like them, it's put the game in a bit of a weird spot in my opinion.
And you wanna know what I like about Wuthering Waves? Some people may dislike this part. I think it's okay. Even like the premium sub DPSs that they've put out, they're like not actually insane improvements over the 4 stars. Any content you're clearing with Yuno, if she's a sub DPS for her outro skill, right? You can slot in Mortifi and you'll basically have maybe 10 seconds of clear time difference, depending on how well your Yuno and Mortifi are built. The gap shortens, right, as the builds get better. You have Rosia over here, who, with her signature, right, and at full investment, is an upgrade over Sanhua. But not to, like, an absurdly high degree. To the point where, again, any team you're using Rosia, you can either use a Sanhua or a Danjin and get pretty much the same results. That's because Augusta is shilled right now. Let's see next reset. We're talking about in floor 1 of the Hazard Tower where there's no Augusta shilling. That's where people have been doing the testing with Yuno and Mortifi, or between Yuno and Mortifi, in like floors of the TOA with no shill buff. And once again, there's not really a significant clear time difference between these 2 units, even on Augusta teams.
Put the game in a bit of a weird spot in my opinion.
Oh, that's hot.
That is kind of a long time. I will say 1 year is a long time. I didn't even know it was that long.
That's hot.
Like, in an ideal world, as 4-star characters do eventually get filtered out, at the very least, new ones could come in to replace them as the alternative options to 5 stars that also come.
That's hot.
For example, if Gallagher stops being good at some point, ideally there would be a Gallagher 2 coming in to kind of fill the niche of an easily accessible but, good enough sustainer for accounts that don't have any better options. We actually saw something like this happen previously with Gallagher effectively replacing Lynx during 2.x. But now, without this happening because they simply aren't being released anymore, there's just no alternatives to use besides a 5-star, so
They probably have, HSR probably has some bad memories about releasing dog shit 4 stars. Because without a doubt, Lynx is so useless, it's unbelievable.
in essence, it kind of becomes something like a double whammy. Not only are the 4 stars that we currently have basically moot unless your account is new or you, hyper invest into them, but they also don't release any new ones to keep an influx of characters available for players to keep up with the current game state. And that's not even mentioning that 5-star characters aren't immune to this filtering. Think about it, how often do you use the meta characters from 2.x nowadays? How about from 1.x?
Who are the two? Let's take a look at the Pride 1 tier list, ladies and gentlemen. Alright. 3.x characters. We got Kafka post buffs. Oh, Sunday. Sunday because of Finon. Okay, so he's one guy. Everybody else, let's see over here. Okay. I guess Branya because of Finon. I guess Sparkle because of Archer. But everybody else is... Bro, she's down there. Dan Hung, Imbibitor Lune, tier 4. Imbibitor Lune, tier 4. Oh my god. Firefly, she was released in 2.7, by the way. It hasn't even been a year since Rapaz release. Boot Hill, tier 2. Oh my lord. Yeah, this shit is cooked, brother. And I'm pretty sure she's only here because of Hisselens, right? Wasn't she just dog shit before this broken-ass character got released? I think that's how it was working, right? Yeah, no, she was dog shit until then. Wait, where the fuck is Black Swan? Oh, yeah, she was dog shit as well, wasn't she? Yeah, these two were at tier fucking 5 prior to her. Where's Topaz? Oh, that's not too bad. It is what it is. Yeah, this is a piece of shit. This is ridiculous. There are just some barely keeping meta relevance because there's just some random broken-ass character that's coming out. Also pushing down every other team in the game. Because yes, you can say, oh, it's awesome that Hisselens came out, right? And now Kafka and Black Swan are dog shit. What about all the rest of these guys that are getting pushed down because Hisselens is so bullshit? That's the thing. It's like you're playing Jenga. You're playing Jenga with the balance of this game. You're like, oh yes, we're gonna help out all these dog shit characters. But guess what? The tower's coming down, right? And so it's just other characters are now in the shit bin as you bring all these older ones to the top with the newest broken release. It's an endless cycle. And now you have Dan Hung Il in tier 4. Wasn't this guy the best fucking unit in the game for 1 month?
Characters can be filtered out at any point as new characters of their archetype release or as the meta shifts away from whatever is currently being used. And frankly, that doesn't exactly feel amazing, and that's also why prior to the buffs back in 3.4, there was a ton of conversation about power creeping old characters out of relevance.
And don't worry, if you want to make the characters that got buffed playable, just pull all the newest ones. Good luck playing Baldy without Hyacinth and Triby. Good luck playing Jing Bu without Hyacinth and Triby. Good luck playing Kafka without Hisselens.
I will say they're kinda counteracting this with freebies, like how they've been giving us 5-star units like Archer and Dan Hang, but
no, that's not helping. I don't care how many free 5 stars this game gives if they're all going to be fucking useless in 6 months. I don't care if they're giving out free 5 stars if the units that I'm paying for are going to be useless in 6 months. Who cares? You're just adding all this trash to my account that's going to be worthless in 6 months.
But I mean, at least personally, I would much rather have a wider, diverse pool of units that consistently gets new additions, rather than 2 freebie characters a year. At the end of the day, this is a team game where you need multiple teams to clear all the content.
And again, with you needing best in slot teams, with the 3 best characters to support a unit for them to clear the content, guess what those free characters end up being? Like, kind of useless because you still need the other 3 units on the team for them to be usable. So it's like, oh yeah, they're giving out all these awesome free units. Well, you need the other units anyways that are on banner to even make them work. Good luck playing Archer without Sparkle. Can you even do it?
Long time now, it's only been 2 teams or 8 characters, but with the new game mode Anomaly Arbitration that's coming soon, you'll
How is this Dan Hung supposed to work without having a Phynon?
need a 3rd team or 12 characters total if you want to participate. And I do want to clarify, obviously I am not trying to say that it's somehow impossible or whatever to have 12 built units. Like, unless you're new, you probably have a few different teams built from past metas, but I am saying that only getting 2 out of the 12 characters you need isn't exactly a whole lot in comparison to how it used to be, where the requirements to clear were significantly lower in terms of overall team cost.
And again, it all just goes back to HP inflation and power creep. It wouldn't be any issue at all to require 12 teams. It wouldn't be any issue at all for the free characters to not be that great without other units, if you could actually use older units on those teams. But like, you can't. And yes, there's one situation where that has occurred with Archer and Sparkle, assuming you pulled Sparkle. But who the fuck pulled Sparkle when she was like actually so bad on release? I think it's only E2 Acheron owners that pulled Sparkle. So I'm one of them. I'm a dipshit, right? I'm greedy and stupid. But I think that's the only part of the population that pulled Sparkle, is if they had E2 Acherons.
And that right there is a decent segue into talking about another point here, which is that, again, this is a team game. It's not like as we've gone on or as the game has progressed, you've only ever had to replace just your DPS, for example. Usually that DPS will come with a new team requirement. Like, if you want to run Break, I hope you have Ron May.
And just fucking Ron May as well as Fug You.
If you want to run Hybrid Carry, hope you got Sunday. If you
And Trippy and Hyacinth.
you want to run an HP character, well, I hope you have Hyacine. Basically, what I'm saying here
The funny thing is, Jing Liu is both of them. Yeah, she actually wants both of these guys.
is that the characters nowadays are designed in a way where they don't function on their own, or to be more specific, they don't function to their full potential outside of the team they're intended to be played in. And really, I don't think that was ever that big of a problem until somewhere in the middle of 2.x with Break, followed by follow-up teams, and it's definitely continued to happen as we've gone into 3.x.
And with there being a 4-character requirement, it feels like you need all 4 of them to make the team feel playable. You take the Super Break team, right? I would say the only one that feels okay if you're missing them is the healer. But the upgrade from having like a Ling Shaw on the Super Break team, brother, she ends up being like a secondary DPS with how much she ends up dealing in Super Break. So it's like, yes, the team will still function. You'll still get Super Breaks, but it will literally deal so much less damage without having all 4 slots completely filled.
To happen as we've gone into 3.x. What makes this worse, in my opinion, is that now, unlike that period of time back in 2.x, we don't have the 4-star characters that made both of those comps more accessible. Like,
imagine your Acheron team with a Pella felt perfectly fine. What if it felt like you couldn't play it without Zhao Kui? It would probably feel bad, but that's just the current state of the game for the 3.x units. All because of Remembrance, all because of this other bullshit that they decided to add in for fun.
Like Moze or Hunt Marsh for follow-up, and the HMC or Gallagher for Break. And yes, I am actually counting the MC as a 4-star there. Really, the point I'm trying to make here is that the cost for teams isn't a gradual line where after a certain amount of time you just have to get one new character and then you wait until the next specific time you have to get another one. It's instead more like a step graph, where if you want to play a character, then you need to get tons of other things for that unit, so it's a large increase in the amount of things you have to roll for.
He forgot to add Evernight onto here. For her to clear the new endgame, you also need Evernight. So this one should be about one unit higher, bucko.
All at once. All in all, at least in my opinion, this results in another reason that pulls don't feel like they have the same mileage that they used to. And honestly, at this point it kind of feels like the requirements to play one character aren't just get the character anymore, because you need a specific team for them, and that's not even mentioning light cones, because that is just a whole other can of worms due to how specific signature light cones are now, and also just how messed up the Remembrance path as a whole is.
I'm glad that other people share the same thoughts as me. I think Remembrance is the worst thing that happened to this game. What an absolutely just clown show behavior from these devs. The greediest fucking thing I've ever seen.
I really do feel like the game has moved in a direction where things are almost becoming too specific, and as a result, you always have to keep investing in new things because there just aren't any other options. And as a result, unless you either skip an entire meta or, you know, spend money, it really doesn't end up feeling that great in my opinion.
Good luck skipping Remembrance, because guess what, guys? Every character in 3.0 is a Remembrance character. So it's like, if you don't like it, you literally can't do anything because every character is a Remembrance one. I think they have 2 that work. What is it? Who's not Remembrance? Is it My Day, Tribby, and who else? Is it Finon? Finon, Anaxa, Herta, My Day, Cypher, Tribby. Okay. Among those characters, though, that are not Remembrance, how many of them have Remembrance characters on their team? Of all the ones that aren't Remembrance, how much of them want Remembrance characters for their best team? All of them except Herta and Anaxa. Okay.
It kind of goes back to what I said earlier in this video. What used to feel like a luxury now feels like a necessity, and for the average player that gets their 90 pulls or so a patch, that necessity just isn't something that they can.
Finon doesn't have Remembrance teammates? Oh, right, I forgot. Finon doesn't have Remembrance teammates because they just released a specific character just for him, right? Yeah. Oh, okay. I guess that's just so much better, too. Okay, all right, let's hear this back.
Earlier in this video, what used to feel like a luxury now feels like a necessity, and
yep.
For the average player that gets their 90 pulls or so a patch,
you're never pulling light cones. You cannot get light cones as well as these characters as well as these teams. It just doesn't work. And they're locking off so many essential parts of like a character's kit behind these light cones, and like the difference between having the light cone and not is so insane. And then you can lose the 75-25 as well. It's just a lot.
That necessity just isn't something that they can always get. One other thing that I feel is worth mentioning here is the lack of events and fun game modes that we've had pretty much since Amphoreus launched. While the actual
I haven't been keeping up with the events.
Pulls we get per patch hasn't really changed all that much.
They literally look lower. Maybe I'm tripping. They literally look lower. But I guess they got some outliers over here, like this 87.5 and this 90.8, so maybe.
I do think that despite that, the specification of teams alongside the lack of varied content throughout the game doesn't really lend itself to players enjoying themselves as much as they could be, or as much as they did in the past. Like, let's sort of ignore Endgame for a second here. Back when the game launched, if you couldn't clear the endgame, there were a lot of main events that you could do, like the Ghost Hunting event or Ethereum Wars and stuff like that, and on top of that, we had relatively consistent updates to the simulated universe with new worlds and also new game modes. Nowadays, though, that kind of content isn't really being released to the same extent that it used to, and
not gonna lie, I thought the simulated universe was like actually the worst fucking shit ever. I'm gonna be real with you. When they started fleshing out like these sim U runs that like to fully complete you had to play for literally 30 hours, I just didn't do any of them. I was like, I gotta do one run where I pick up 5 specific upgrades of this one path, and then there's 20 achievements for each path, and then there's 7 paths, so I gotta do like 100 runs to get like half of the. I'm good, bro. I'm not here to play this game like a fucking job.
And personally, I feel this makes the disparity of needing all these new things and then more pulls to get those things worse. Like, here's a hypothetical example to explain what I mean. Let's say your favorite character back in 1.x was Kafka, because at least back then it felt like she was half the player base's favorite. And let's also say that you hate Dot as a playstyle, so instead of using a normal build for Kafka, you ran a crit Kafka build.
Guys, I hate building attack on my characters. I'm gonna go build Augusta with HP. Fuck it, I'm gonna build her with HP. I know she doesn't have scalings, much like how Kafka doesn't have crit scaling at all, but I'm still gonna...
While you could still try to brute force content, it was significantly more difficult to do so. But you know where you didn't have to brute force? Simulated universe and events. The funny thing is that the example I gave wasn't actually a hypothetical, because one of my friends actually did that and ran crit Kafka all the way through the highest difficulties of Swarm Disaster back then, and he also played it in pretty much every combat event that ran. Later on, he did the same through Golden Gears and also other events like the Ghost Hunting one, and while he doesn't play anymore, I'm sure he would have...
Sorry, it's just when I heard while he doesn't play anymore, I started.
Kept going with that same build and playstyle if new modes were added, but they really just haven't been. I mean, sure, we've had some updates to Divergent Universe and we do also get some events, but the vast majority of those updates are small and the events are usually mini-games rather than.
Unfortunately, I do think that this is something that I'm beginning to see happen to Wuthering Waves, where now we're getting patches. It will, after version 2.7, ladies and gentlemen, Wuwa will have been 110 days without a combat event. After version 2.7, it will be 110 plus days with no combat events. And if you're somebody in the Wuwa community that thinks that that's too long, people are starting to call you a Doom poster. Those people are stupid. Okay, this is unacceptable. And you don't want Wuthering Waves to just be this shit every patch and then nothing else. Because that's currently what 2.7 is.
Than something your characters can actually interact with. So that leaves the actual endgame modes and I guess story as well as the only content that you have to play your characters in with weird builds. But
does that sound like something going on right now in Wuwa, ladies and gentlemen?
the endgame is scaled beyond the point where super weird builds can still comfortably make it through it. For the players like my friend with Crit Kafka, or for a newer player that doesn't have all the units they need, or maybe for a player that just lost all their 50/50s and couldn't get a full team for their favorite new unit, well, there's just not a whole lot for them to actually do anymore. So when I'm talking about the disparity of needing all these pulls, I'm talking about it in the sense of some characters simply don't have content they're playable in without their special team, and therefore despite the fact that the pulls have stayed relatively consistent across the game's lifespan, the fact of the matter is we really do just need more at this point to comfortably sustain a count, and all the
Or they just stop power creeping the fuck out of the game. But I guess this is really the take, right? I think players have given up trying to address HP inflation and power creep. It's not going to happen. So now we're going to play hand number 2. Can you guys give us more shit so that we can deal with the HP inflation and the power creep? We'll see how this play goes, because Hoyoverse is the greediest company, perhaps on God's green fucking earth. Maybe they'll listen. They'll probably not, though.
different teams that are required now for different content. I will say we do have the Anomaly Arbitration mode releasing soon, which is actually new content, but
Brother, I wish he had played it first before making this vid, because it's cooked.
it also appears to be more endgame content that those same weird builds or units without their best in slot team won't really be able to participate in.
You want to know what's in fucking Anomaly Arbitration? Let me show you what the buffs in that game mode look like, brother. For every 1% HP the target enemy loses, reduce critical damage dealt to them by 3%. Basically, they said, you're not 3-starring this unless you pull Hisselins. Sorry, Kritka. Sorry, Crit Kafka. You're gonna have to play her in the regular way, bozo. Oh, man. These buffs are crazy, by the way. It's like, basically, they're telling you, you can only play this type of team in this content. You're only allowed to use the exact team that we're telling you to use. You're using Super Break up here, you're using Dot over here, and you're using Casterus down here, buddy. And by the way, guys, I just really need to make something clear to some people. Guys, so let's just look over here. You see how this buff is called Tempering? And then next to the Dot boss, it says Tempering. That means this Tempering buff belongs to the guy in the middle, because the same name is showing up on both the pop-up and then the buff over here. And so, no, it's not for the fucking break team, because that would be Resilient Armor. And this one says Tempering. Like, I got people in here saying that this is the buff for the Super Break boss. It's like, can you guys not fucking read?
There was also the Currency Wars game mode they announced that's coming in 3.7, but we know next to nothing about it, so it's basically just hoping at this point. Now, I know all this is just a shot in the dark, and realistically, I'm just one guy ranting into the void here, but I do really think that the game has changed over the course of the 2 years it's been out, from one that had a lot of flexibility and diversity, to a game that's significantly more specific in its requirements than it used to be, which results in a lot more pulls being required to comfortably play the game.
If HSR had 3-person teams, it wouldn't be as bad. And this is the thing. That's why I also think games like Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero can't ever feel like this bad from a team building perspective because they only have 3-person teams. With how teammates, right? When you run one main DPS, and then 3 supports, or 2 supports and 1 healer, the amount of like exponential layering of buffs you can have that makes just that one DPS character deal so much damage, the potential grows exponentially when you have 4 characters in a team instead of 3. Because you can only get, your main DPS can only get the buffs from 2 other units at their peak. That limits how bad not having one of the teammates can feel. Imagine if Wuwa had 4-person teams. Imagine if ZZZ had 4-person teams. It would feel so much more predatory when you have lineups that feel like they need not just 2 more teammates, but they need 3. And so to make one character feel good or make one character feel playable, you just went from needing 320 pulls with no guarantee, right, to 480. That's kind of a lot.
That said, there are actually a lot of ways this could be solved that aren't just giving us, more rolling currency or whatever.
Yeah, best in slot teams in HSR and Genshin are literally 50% more expensive than they can be in ZZZ or Wuba. I think that's literally a fact. Best in slot Genshin and HSR teams are at their core 50% more expensive.
I mean, the easiest one is just simply releasing more 4-stars that are accessible to players. I talked about this briefly earlier, but it is actually natural for characters to leave the meta after a time, otherwise it just never really develops. But as that happens, new accessible characters should replace them, and I don't feel like that's currently happening at a fast enough pace, even though we do get some freebies. A more difficult route would be trying to actually balance the game, but that's a whole other point that's been talked to death now by multiple other videos of my own.
They're not gonna do that. They're just going to power creep every single update. And this latest anomaly arbitration pile of dog shit that they just made, which is like actually the worst endgame mode I think anyone has ever experienced, is just further proof they're not going to fucking fix it.
And not to mention by other creators. And lastly, the other option is to just make characters that have less specific needs and therefore reintroduce more flexibility to the game.
And this is where Wuthering Waves is the best example of a developer that actually listens. Y'all remember when we had units like, let's just be honest here, Zani, who feels like she needs Phoebe, or Kartithia, who's a lot stronger with Chakona. Instead of further going down this route, these devs at Kuro decided to release Augusta and Yuno, who are 2 of the most standalone units in the history of the game. They, like, 2 of their, like, so their best in slot teams just, like, feature Shorekeeper and then, like, a buffer. And yes, Yuno with Augusta is great, but Augusta with Mortefi is also great. Yuno can also use Arrow Rover and Chakota and be a main DPS, or she can support Jian, or she can use John Shin and Shorekeeper and be a DPS too. These 2 units are such a far cry from like this, oh, you need other units for them to feel good. They are launching and performing in such a wide variety of teams. It's actually ridiculous. And Frolova falls into that bucket as well because she doesn't need her she can be a sub DPS and a main DPS at the same time. Be played as like a teammate that buffs heavy attack or buffs havoc. But then she also has her best in slot team as well when she's on mono havoc with Cantarella and Rosia, but she don't need them. So yeah, every single release following 2.4 with Kartithia and her specificity, which honestly isn't that bad. They've been great characters. So yeah, that's what it looks like when a developer chooses option number 3. You can just look at Wuthering Waves, Kuro Games, and version 2.6 of Wuwa. And that is when this third step over here is actually being followed.
Like, don't get me wrong, Finon is a very, very cool character, but him removing the rest of his teammates from the field makes him also have very, very specific needs that not many other characters have. As another example, Hyacine being the only relevant character that buffs team-wide HP makes her invaluable for those HP teams compared to other options.
Just use links, bro. Just use links.
And Evernight is another example in that she's hyper-specific to teams with memo sprites. While some of these characters are generically useful like Hyacine, that's more just because she's a busted character in general, rather than her actually being intended to be generic. I mean, who knew that a healer dealing just as much damage as a main DPS would be kinda broken?
Just so you guys know, like, I feel like a company should be able to be sued for this. There's no way Hyacinth is, like, with her light cone, is worth as much as, like, Fu Xuan and her light cone. You're actually just scamming people. You're just scamming people by making Hyacinth the same cost as all these other... That's not real.
But really, in all seriousness, I don't know what the actual answer here is. Like, I've given my ideas, but at the end of the day, again, I know I'm basically just ranting into the void here. With that said, what I do know is that the pull economy doesn't feel amazing right now as a player, so I kinda just wanted to talk about it and get my thoughts and feelings out there about this. Anyway.
The pull economy would feel fine if you didn't feel the need to pull multiple units a patch to keep up with the pace of the game. And because you do, you are really beginning to see or feel that pulls aren't sufficient when they were in the past because there was not nearly as much pressure. And right now it's just, hey, as long as they keep scaling the endgame content and they keep releasing bullshit like this, don't worry, it'll get worse. So yeah, like it's been getting worse for the past, since the start of the year, to be honest.
Anyway, that's all my thoughts, and I appreciate you listening if you made it this far. If you have some thoughts of your own on this topic, I'd love to hear about it, so feel free to leave a comment down below or join my Discord link down in the description to talk with me about it.
All right. Well, yeah, we've already given our thoughts on the matter. Great video by Mr. Fleur over here. We've done exactly as he's asked. And, you know, I think it's always good to do a bit of, like, reflection, right? To see what is happening in all of these other games to literally make them so much worse as time has gone on. So that it's essentially a case study for what to watch out for when it starts happening in other titles. Maybe the ones that you do play. And I think the biggest thing to think about, right, is the HSRification of Wuwa, especially when it comes to these fucking events. Because guess what, guys? Guess what's not in Wuthering Waves right now? A combat event. And they got shit like this instead. And I don't really like it. Because it does make it feel like this game is becoming more and more like HSR. Where the events are just like literal casual shit and they have nothing to do with the actual fucking game itself. And that's just how it is currently. And I hope it's something that Kuro Games addresses really, really, really soon. Because it's been 3 updates of this. So yeah, that'll be that for that one, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you all thought. Peace.